Welcome to the Wobbly Middle, a podcast for women rethinking their careers. Hi, Lynn. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
One of the joys for me about this podcast is discovering things like the adventures of Breakup Girl. Take us back to the 1990s. What was the cultural moment that gave rise to Breakup Girl?
Well, first of all, Breakup Girl, just for context, is the superhero who helps all people with romantic emergencies. We've got superheroes who can bend steel bars, which is great. We think it would also be great to have a superhero who can mend broken hearts. And that's who Breakup Girl is. So she is a character that my creative partner and I invented in the 90s to help people not only get through and over breakups. Getting through or over a breakup is the best way to prepare you, certainly for your next relationship, but also just to be you. She kind of came out of a kitchen moment, and then we placed her in a cultural context. My creative partner, Chris, who's a genius, we were working on a book together about how to survive a breakup. And we were roommates too, and in Brooklyn. And we were sitting in our kitchen, and this is where first of all most great ideas come from sitting in the kitchen. And second of all, we were also having a meeting, and Chris was like, I'm thinking we create a character, a narrator, to kind of to hold the voice of the book. And like, what if she was a superhero? It cascaded from there. But the cultural moment that the whole concept lived in, and a lot of this has changed, I'm happy to say, romantic relationships were really thought of as the domain of only women. Women managed relationships and men had them, maybe. And painting with a broad brush. And of course, we thought very much in gender binary terms, the culture. And it was very much like dating and relationships content. We didn't call it content yet, but that's what it was, are for women, and men just like show up as the boyfriend. And that's not helpful to anybody. And so what we kind of realized after we developed the character, what we realized we were doing, partly on purpose and partly because of who came to us, is that we were speaking to everybody.
And what conversations weren't happening that you felt needed to happen?
The conversations that weren't happening were conversations that assumed that everyone in a relationship had an equal stake in its success and an equal stake in managing its success. And conversations that didn't automatically vilify the other gender for things that were going wrong. We never did any humor or jokes that were like, women, am I right? Or men, am I right? And aren't men and women different? That whole gender binary was super popular at the time. There was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And there was the book, The Rules, which was super popular in the US, about how women should play men, basically, and that's not true, how women should never, ever make a move at all. And leave men in the driver's seat. Not everything in both of those books was utterly wrong. It was more reductive than helpful. And so we really, especially given that once we launched our online advice column, which I have to tell you went viral overnight, we got letters and questions to the advice column from everyone. It was people who didn't know, who hadn't really paid attention to who we were, who assumed that a girl superhero could only talk to girls. But the people who actually were our fans and our audience and our people immediately kind of intuited that like this was a place for everyone. So we immediately got questions from every sexual orientation, every age, every gender. Before we even talked about that stuff, we were getting letters from trans people, from gay kids, all that stuff. We somehow created the humor, and this has sort of been my jam for decades, the humor, and just literally it's a comic superhero in all senses of the word, kind of made it a safe place, even though our sense of our purpose was serious. Our delivery system was funny and welcoming. So I think that made the difference.
It is very funny, but you're also using humor there to deliver ideas of change.
Exactly. Humor is completely a delivery system for change. It just is. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and it doesn't necessarily make people do a 180 immediately, people who are entrenched in their own beliefs, but it contributes to cultural norms and is a real cultural force in, contributing to cultural norms, assumptions, contributes to the idea of who has power, like who gets, if in the case of stand-up, like who gets to talk and you have to listen. And so that's why I've done a lot of different things, but the through line has been about using comedy to be part of change, or, and this is related, about making sure that everyone has access to creating comedy.
Yeah, and I see from your work, some things you talk about is how comedy can give you freedom because perfect isn't funny.
Yeah, you cannot do comedy without failing in some way. It's not possible. I mean, that's true of most things, right? That we try to get better at, of course. And when I say fail, I don't necessarily mean spectacular flame out, though that happens. I just mean you try a joke, it doesn't work, you fix it. It's made of experimentation, and it's made of the most creative kind of rejection, And so that's one way in which it is freeing, because you get used to it. And the other reason is most comics, whatever their style, are talking about flaws in the world, flaws in themselves, and that's why they're relatable. And that is also freeing.
Now, I want to come back to opening your comedy school, Gold Comedy, but you've done lots of things. You're a journalist, you're an author, you're an activist, and you've worked a lot in that freelance world, which requires a lot of change. It requires us to be agile, to look ahead. How have you managed that change over your career?
I think the agility for me was just part of the appeal. I liked kind of transferring similar skills to different places. I don't know why I just thought of this, but you know the game Candyland that has sort of a twisting path with lots of different colors, but it's all on the same board. So the skills include writing, talking, and campaigning on some level, strategizing change, especially what we call culture change, where it's the slower, but for me, more fun work of changing people's norms and assumptions about what is so and what should be. So for me, it was just like, where am I transferring my skills today? Or where am I developing my skills today? It felt like a fun patchwork, different color squares on the same board.
So you've never really worked in a salaried environment?
I did. From 2011 to 2016, I was the VP of communications, or I worked my way up to being VP of communications for a really cool global human rights organization that differentiated itself because it worked in culture change. It used pop culture and other cultural tools to help people understand human rights issues as real and relevant and actionable, including in the United States, where we mostly talk about civil rights. So we framed things like gender-based violence as a human rights issue, but then we would do like animations that showed at NASCAR races that help build will and put the idea in your head that you can be part of challenging gender-based violence, even if you're not the problem, but you can be part of the solution. And just trying to shift little by little, shift public opinion in ways that are not scoldy or lectury, which I think people respond better to.
Absolutely. I think there are two parts to that. I suppose the one I was talking about, where you move in a freelance world, you have to value your contribution. And especially when you're working more in an activist setting. You've said before that men tend to be perceived as doing well, whereas women are perceived as doing good.
Oh, yes.
And so I suppose it's about crossing that and still doing good and still doing well, working up the courage to be paid for what you do.
Oh, man. I mean, don't get me started. Well, you got me started. This is not a unique thing for me to say. It's just I'm going to agree with all the other people who've said it. Often when you do something creative, people think, well, you're living the dream, so you just need to express yourself so we can pay you less or not at all. It's not limited to artists. I know a bunch of people, we talk about this all the time, but getting asked to speak on a panel and even travel to speak on the panel. And then they say, well, we have no budget for paying the speakers. And you're like, but you don't. And there's of course times when you can make a thoughtful decision case by case to accept that thing. But I remember one time I was writing for the humor column of the late great George magazine, and they decided that they were no longer going to do the humor column. It was just an editorial change that had nothing to do with me. And this was the early internet. And they said, we can't pay you, but we can put your column on our internet website. And I was like, but you can't. Unless you pay me. But what's the difference? Well, we thought you just like the exposure. Exposure will not buy you lunch. So that kind of assumption persists. I do think, to your point about women, men do good, men do well, women do good. That's a thing for female women CEOs and founders. Once I mention that gold comedy is designed especially for women and non-binary folks and others, the speed with which people assume that it's a nonprofit is breathtaking, because women are associated with being either the founders of or the beneficiaries of nonprofits, and like I'm helping people, that kind of very like charitable thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's almost 100% of the time that people make that assumption, and it's absolutely based on gender, 100%.
To women who are beginning to build themselves up in one of these creative areas, how do they steel themselves to ask for money?
The best advice I ever heard is from someone I know who is extremely accomplished. She's British, actually, extremely accomplished in advertising, and has gone on to found a cool business called Make Sex Not Porn, which she has struggled to fund because everyone's like, sex, what? Porn is it? Look her up, Cindy Gallup. She's amazing. Anyway, her advice is, when anyone asks her, how much money should I ask for this gig, job, role, she says, say the largest amount you can without actually bursting into laughter. And I've taken that really seriously. And I only overshot one time. And it works. I mean, because people, on the one hand, we have the problem of not paying you for your work, which we have discussed. On the other hand, another prevailing norm, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad one, although I know where it gets corrupted, is that the more you pay, the better it is. Typically true. At this point, they're paying me or people, at our age for like 30 years of experience. So, and that also means I can do things faster.
And I couldn't agree with you more. That's the measure of how lawyers' rates go up over time due to experience. So that makes perfect sense from my lawyer background. But let's talk about gold comedy. What inspired you to open a comedy school?
Well, for clarity, for more context, I should say, it's a comedy, it's all online, so your listeners can check us out. It's a mostly online comedy school and professional network and content studio. As we've discussed, women, non-binary creators, others, really everyone. We welcome everyone. We just don't welcome bro vibes, where our folks come to build their comedy careers and join a powerful network and make funny stuff that actually gets seen on all kinds of stages and screens. Honestly, I was nursing the idea for a while because of, based on my pretty crappy but not the worst experiences in stand-up, which I loved. I loved doing stand-up. So it didn't stop me or, back then we just had this idea that we just had to live with it. It doesn't mean we were doormats. It's just we had this idea that, women have to carry rape whistles and put up with X level of harassment.
Sorry, is this backstage on the comedy circuit?
It's stand-up. It was who got into writers' rooms. It was how you were treated. It was, oh, sorry, we already have a woman on the lineup. It was, oh, sorry, we already have a woman in the writers' room. It was direct microaggressions. It was in improv. You might be the only one or two women or women on a team, and then they always kind of position you as the woman, as opposed to a character. You're always the mother, the waitress, or a prostitute. And there's only one Smurfette. Some, but not all of that has changed. And it didn't stop me. We just thought that and it's not that we weren't already activated and activists, but there was a degree to which we were just it's how it is. We just got to put our heads down and just do the thing. But I'd always believed that it really mattered, as we talked about, who does comedy, who gets the power, who gets the hold the mic while other people be quiet, who gets to like create shows, who gets to decide what shows are on, all of that stuff, and who's running the writer's room, all of those things. And my angle was, well, comedy is hard for everybody, even straight white dudes. It's hard. But what if we can make it easier for the people for whom it's the hardest? And what if we could open up the funnel more and just put more women, just more women in comedy, enable more to start, enable more to not quit, enable more to get seen and meet each other and form powerful groups that get things done. That's great for them as individuals. And then, as we said, the more we have in terms of numbers, the less unusual and interesting we are, and the more power we have. And we talked about why that matters. So that was the context. And then the day-to-day is just tons of classes, introductions to other people in the network, forming community, live Zoom meet and greets with celebrities and pros, open mics, opportunities to get your stuff made, opportunities for us to help you get your stuff made. We have web series out that are streaming out there. We have solo shows and solo festivals that we're part of. We have we've got some producing plans for next year happening. So we really also mean it. A lot of people talk about, well, you're building confidence and freedom, and we are, but that's like a given and a byproduct.
Women who are coming, I know you've got women of all ages. I was also interested to see you had a teen.
That was actually my original idea, was to start with teen girls. And what I found right away, was that they are absolutely hilarious and fantastic. But for every teen girl I was able to engage, there were like 10 grownups saying, but do you have stuff for adults? And I was like, I got to listen to the customers. So now it's not that we do have teenagers around, but now I'm like, well, we're building the next generation. Who's going to send the ladder down for the next generation and just change the norms for the people who come later?
I read somewhere else you describing yourself going to a summer camp when you were a kid, and the boys got on stage and just stuck grapefruits under their shirts and wiggled their bum, and that was funny. Whereas girls didn't have the same access to humor. And I think it's so interesting that when you came to open your comedy school, the first people that came to mind were your younger selves.
Yeah, that was for sure a formative experience. It was a weekend ski trip. And one of the side note, one of the dudes may or may not have been Adam Sandler. It was. And this is in like 1983. And it wasn't that women didn't have the girls didn't have the same access to humor per se. It was that, my crowd in that group was all the funny, loud girls, right? Let me correct myself. Being loud is not the only way to be funny, but we happen to be loud. And my first thought when I saw the dudes get up there and goof around, and I'm not saying they weren't funny. Sure, I'm sure they were funny. They were just goofing. And I knew somehow, even though I was 15 or 16, I knew that it wasn't that we couldn't be funny. It's that we couldn't be sloppy. We didn't have the lowest possible bar to get a laugh. I knew that there's no way that the girls could go get I don't know what from the kitchen and stick it in our pants and be like, ugh. I knew it wouldn't land. Not because women aren't funny, but because the audience isn't as readily accepting of women being goofballs. And so my first thought was, what are the girls going to do? And my second thought was we're going to let it go. And I hated it. So yeah, that was a driving experience for sure.
For the listeners of this show, I'm interested in those women who are coming in midlife, the ones that have always they've had this idea for a screenplay, or they want to try out stand-up comedy. Tell me about those women that are coming through, in their 40s and 50s.
Yes, I love this so much. It's very true. We have a lot of women who come in exactly as you described, who are at a moment in their lives when they see a new opportunity for whatever reason. It may be that they have all of a sudden an empty nest. It may be that they have reached a point in their career where they're comfortable and working hard, but not grinding, and clawing their way up the ladder. It may be, and their career may be associated with entertainment. Maybe it was the pandemic when they were all cooped up and itchy, that they started wondering, is this all there is? I got to do the thing, or maybe it's just midlife. I don't know. It's different for different people. But they come to us, and yeah, we have our premium class called Build and Pitch Any Idea. And it's taught by a very experienced TV, theater, and live solo show producer and director named Ryan Cunningham. And she has developed a framework. It's not just a pitching class. It's a develop your idea such that you are able to thoroughly and passionately pitch it in a way that will land with people, the executives that you need to pitch it to. So you can come in with like the tiniest seedling of an idea. Could be autobiographical, could be not, could be random, but it cracks you up, or it doesn't have to be a comedy. Could be TV, could be film, could be a web series, could be a podcast, could be an adaptation of a book you wrote. And her framework helps you really just develop the heart and soul of that idea and make you fall in love with it even harder. And partway through the course, when you're ready, more than halfway, then you start building all of the actual materials that reflect the development of that idea, the pitch deck, the verbal pitch, all of those things. And then the class ends with you delivering that pitch to a panel of experienced development executives who aren't there necessarily to greenlight your project. That's not the exercise. But often they say, like, do you mind if I talk to so-and-so about you? And so people leave that class with pitches teed up and ready to go. And what we really notice is that the women in their 40s and up are the ones with the biggest fire in their bellies. Everyone else is great. The people really go crazy with passion about this class. So everyone like takes it up to a 10. And then the women, the older women, our age, take it up to 11, 12 and above, just in terms of their effort and what they produce, because of just like, they just have more years of life to put into it, even if their project isn't directly autobiographical.
And if you brought back Breakup Girl, what do you think she'd make of the environment we're in 25 years later?
Funny you should say that, because I took Ryan's class also to develop a new idea around to put Breakup Girl. Like, she's very a product of her time in the sense of the like tools and norms of dating back then. Online dating was super new when we were doing that. We used to joke about like, if you think waiting by the phone is lame, try waiting by the computer, so it was like this very new, weird thing. So we're developing a pilot based on the new idea of an updated. Where we are now is actually a little easier than how she would respond. It's who is she now with the same core beliefs and the same motivating ideas and the same animating, the same things that animate her sense of justice and fairness and what's right are absolutely the same, but the environment is completely different. I think the old character would be pleased. I think the old character would be like, I told you. I really think that the idea that women take care of in binary, gender binary couples, that women take care of the relationships and men have them, feels old now. So that would make her happy.
We do all want to meet her this next incarnation, so keep going.
Yeah, no, I think you'll like her.
And your own self, what would you tell your 30-year-old self about your career evolution?
I would say that you don't necessarily have to have your Candyland board planned out, as long as you are following what lights you up. And also, just as important, as long as you surround yourself with people who make you feel like you. Which is advice that I'm borrowing from Gina Davis, who said it once in an event I was at. So I'll give her the credit, but that's really it. It's the people. Surround yourself with people who light you up and who reflect who you are. You don't have to change who you are in order to succeed. In fact, if you are, then maybe you're not.
And I think, this idea of community, we talk about it a lot on the Wobbly Middle. You've got to start talking about these dreams. You've got to start telling people what you want to do so that they can encourage you and give you feedback. It's really important to begin to say out loud what you want for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your career.
Absolutely. We have a lot of time left. I would just like to go back and say that I remember when I corrected myself a few minutes ago and said, we were the loud, funny ones. Loud and funny aren't the same. What I mean is, no matter who you are, and I'm talking to your listeners, if you're curious about developing your sense of humor, please know that, again, you don't have to change who you are in order to be funny. You don't have to be less shy. You don't have to be more confident, quote unquote. Who you already are is all the raw material that you have, the life you lived. Even if you think your life is boring, stand-up comedy and TV writing and all those things are not about like wacky things that happen to you. They're just about your perspective on the world, whatever your unique lens is. Even if you don't think it's unique, I promise you it is. And so just if you're curious, I really encourage you to explore now as opposed to waiting for yourself to turn into someone else, which you won't. You already have everything it takes. And it might just be, a class that you need to kind of understand the mechanics and then understand really all the opportunities for you as you are right now, to whether it's just to develop your sense of awareness and kind of debating of humor in your world, or to really build a new creative side hustle, or even a whole pivot. People do it. I see it every day.
You don't have to run away to the circus, but you can if you want.
Be my guest. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And we'd love to stay in touch.
Thank you. I'd be happy to.